She said it without blinking. Step aside, these seats aren't for you. The words cut through the terminal like a sharp, public accusation. Two little black twin girls froze, clutching their perfectly valid first-class boarding passes, their eyes flicking up to their father as if asking whether they'd done something wrong. Behind them, the morning light spilled across the windows, but the air felt colder than metal. People turned. Some whispered. And the flight attendant? She never broke her stance. One finger pointed at the children as if they were trespassers in their own story. The father exhaled once, slow, steady, the kind of stillness a man learns only after years of swallowing moments just like this. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to our main character. The father stepped forward, his voice low, calm. Their seats are in first class. He lifted the tickets for her to see, but the attendant didn't even glance. Sir, don't hold up the line. These passes aren't real. You and your kids need to move. The pause before your kids carried the weight of every assumption she thought she could hide. One twin gripped her sister's hand tighter, the other tucked her ticket against her chest, as if it were proof of their existence. He knelt beside them, speaking softly, so only they could hear. You belong exactly where I put you. Don't forget that. But the attendant stepped closer, her voice sharp enough to draw attention from the next gate. I said step aside. First class isn't open for. She didn't finish the sentence, but the meaning landed hard. A murmur rippled through the crowd, a mix of unease, irritation, and something uglier from a few faces too eager to agree with her. The father rose slowly, no sudden movements, no raised voice. Just presence, controlled, unwavering, the kind of authority that didn't need to announce itself. Scan the tickets, he said. They're valid. She scoffed, tapping her badge like it granted her absolute power. I don't need to scan anything. I know fake when I see it. Behind him, a junior employee, barely out of training, shifted nervously. He had seen those tickets flash green earlier. He opened his mouth, then closed it again when the attendant shot him a warning look. The line behind them thickened. A few passengers crossed their arms, as if the family was the inconvenience, not the discrimination playing out in front of them. One man in a suit muttered, always trying to get into places they don't pay for. Another woman clicked her tongue in annoyance. The twins heard every word. Their father heard every word. He had lived this soundtrack before. But today, in this terminal, in front of his daughters, something in him refused to fold the way the world expected. He pulled a small earpiece from his pocket, pressed it once, and said quietly, Rachel, we may have a situation. The attendant laughed, assuming it was a bluff. The crowd assumed it was desperation. But the man himself? He knew exactly what he was setting in motion. And the airline, though none of them realized it yet, was about to learn who they had just humiliated at gate C-14. The young trainee had seen the green confirmation flash on the screen earlier, but fear pinned him in place as the flight attendant stepped even closer to the family. Sir, she said, loud enough for everyone within 20 feet to hear, you need to stop pretending. First class is for verified passengers only. You cannot just walk your way into it. Her tone carried the same dismissive edge that had been thrown at countless travelers who did not look like they belonged. The father did not flinch. He had lived through versions of this moment so many times that the script was predictable. Suspicion, escalation, humiliation, and then silence. Silence was what they always counted on. One twin held her sister's hand tighter as passengers behind them shifted, annoyed by the delay, ignoring the growing cruelty unfolding right in front of them. The trainee swallowed hard, stepping forward an inch. Ma'am, his tickets scanned valid earlier, he said softly, almost apologetically. The attendant cut him off with a sharp, slicing glare. Do not overstep. You are not cleared to verify anything without my approval. The trainee froze again. The father looked at him, not with anger, but with recognition. He had once been that young man, standing in a room where he knew something wrong was happening, but the power to speak carried consequences he could not afford. The father rose fully now, pulling his shoulders back. His voice remained controlled. Scan the tickets again. The attendant crossed her arms. I do not need to. I know what is real. Her words echoed the same arrogance he had heard at 25 when a bank manager insisted his down payment had to be fraudulent, even after he provided every document they asked for. It echoed the voice of the hotel clerk who once told him, "People like you do not stay in suites like that," forcing him to sit in the lobby while others breezed past. His daughters were now watching the same prejudice that shaped every hard-earned victory of his life. He would not let this become their memory too. A man in a business suit behind them sighed dramatically. This is ridiculous. If they cannot afford first class, they should just say so. Some of us have flights to catch. A woman chimed in. Honestly, people try anything these days. The twins' breath shuddered, their eyes lowering. The father placed a steady hand on each of their shoulders. Stand tall, he whispered. You belong here. The attendant leaned in, as if delivering a verdict. Last warning. Step aside or security will escort you out. Security. The word landed with intent. It assumed danger where there was none. It assumed threat where there was only patience. It assumed guilt where there was only innocence. The father inhaled slowly, letting the weight of that word settle before he exhaled it out. Then he pressed a finger to his earpiece. Rachel, confirm activation of Protocol 7. Her voice responded instantly, calm, decisive, unmistakably efficient. Protocol 7 is active. Corporate oversight has been notified and is monitoring in real time. Do you want escalation authorization? The attendant's expression flickered for the first time, a tiny fracture. The trainee's eyes widened. The crowd hushed. Stand by, the father replied. We will give them one more opportunity. He looked at the attendant again, offering her a simple, undeniable choice. Scan the tickets, she scoffed, turning toward her tablet. Fine. When the system rejects them, do not say, I did not warn you. She dragged the scanner across the first barcode. A beep. Green. She blinked. Scan the second. Another green. Scan the third. Green again. A ripple of murmurs spread through the line. The trainee nodded quickly, relieved. See? They are valid, he said. But the attendant stiffened, refusing to yield. There must be a glitch. This does not mean anything. It means everything, the father replied. His voice had not risen, but the tone had shifted, gaining weight the way a storm gathers without wind. The attendant stepped back. For the first time, her authority faltered. The father lowered his hand from his earpiece, but Rachel's voice still hummed softly through it. Corporate is ready whenever you say the word. The moment hung there, suspended, waiting for the truth to land. And it would, because the airline was about to discover exactly who they had tried to push aside. The attendant's denial hung in the air for only a moment before she doubled down, grasping for control she no longer had. There is a malfunction, she insisted, as if her words could rewrite what everyone had just witnessed. The system must be experiencing a technical error. These tickets still do not grant you access to first class. Her voice grew sharper as she spoke, revealing the familiar panic of someone watching their authority weaken. Several passengers shifted uncomfortably. Others exchanged glances that carried a quiet but widening understanding of what was actually happening here. The father did not step back. Instead, he gently nudged one twin behind him as a precaution, not out of fear, but out of instinct. His daughter's fingers tightened around the fabric of his shirt as if they could feel the tension threading through the terminal. You scanned the tickets, he said calmly. 3 confirmed greens. That is not a malfunction. That is verification. She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, a deeper voice cut in from behind her. It belonged to the gate's supervisor, a man who had been standing far enough away to pretend ignorance until the situation could no longer be ignored. He approached with an irritated sigh, adjusting his badge as if preparing to deliver a final ruling. What seems to be the issue? He asked the attendant, though his eyes flicked to the twins with unmistakable skepticism. They are holding up the line with fake credentials, she said quickly, relieved to lean on someone she assumed shared her perspective. The scanner is malfunctioning, so it is reading them as valid. The supervisor nodded as if that was all he needed to hear. Sir, you and your children will need to step aside for additional verification. First class cannot be compromised. The trainee stepped forward again, voice trembling but present. They are not fake. I saw the system validate them earlier, he said. It was not a glitch. They are fully registered. The supervisor turned to him with a cold, practiced condescension. You are new. When you have been here long enough, you will learn that reading a screen does not mean understanding what it says. The father watched the dynamic unfold, recognizing the subtle pattern the same way a chess master sees an opponent repeat a losing opening. He had lived this chapter before. Different airport, different uniform, same prejudice wearing a new face. The attendant crossed her arms. Security is on standby. If he continues to refuse, they can escort them out and clear the gate. One twin's breath hitched. The other clung to her father's hand. He knelt down, eye level with them, and his voice softened into something warm but steady. You are not in trouble, he whispered. Do you understand me? You did nothing wrong. Their small nods were enough to anchor him. When he stood again, the calm in his posture had shifted into something sharper, something forged not out of anger, but out of resolve. You will not call security on my children, he said. Not for your assumptions. Not for your convenience. The supervisor lifted his chin, dismissive. Sir, this is standard protocol. No, the father replied. This is bias being dressed up as protocol. The words landed, heavy and undeniable. Several passengers looked down, while others straightened as if finally seeing the scene for what it was. The attendant scoffed. This is not bias. This is procedure. Procedure, he repeated, would mean following the scan results. Procedure would mean verifying before accusing. Procedure would not involve raising your voice at two children who have done nothing but stand where their tickets placed them. Her jaw tightened. She motioned sharply toward the intercom panel. Security will handle this. But before she could press the button, his earpiece crackled softly. Rachel's voice emerged again, precise and professional. Corporate oversight has connected. The board is aware of a possible incident at Gate C14. Do you require executive authority intervention? He did not respond immediately. Instead, he looked around the terminal. Every witness, every whisper, every accusation had accumulated into a single undeniable truth. This was not about tickets. It was about belonging, and who they believed deserved to have it. He lifted his hand halfway toward his earpiece but paused, giving the attendant and the supervisor one final moment to correct themselves. They did not. The supervisor stepped forward with forced authority. Sir, if you do not comply this instant, we will remove you from this area. The father lowered his hand. Then, with a voice steady enough to silence the space around him, he said, Rachel, escalate to executive authority. They have made their decision. Now I will make mine. Passengers stared, unsure of what that meant. The attendant frowned, confused. The supervisor smirked, assuming bluff. But the airport was seconds away from learning who they had just threatened at Gate C14. For a moment, the terminal held its breath. The attendant's hand hovered over the intercom as if she still believed she controlled the scene, while the supervisor squared his shoulders with the confidence of someone who had never been challenged by the truth. But the father stood taller now, not because he needed to prove anything, but because he finally decided he would not shrink in front of his daughters again. Rachel's voice came through the earpiece, crisp and certain. Executive authority escalation confirmed. Corporate oversight is now observing all audio and visual feeds at Gate C14. Do you want me to notify the board directly? The attendant frowned. What board? She muttered, but no one answered her. Instead, the father watched the supervisor step forward, attempting to reclaim control with a stern, official-sounding tone. Sir, putting on a show will not change the fact that you are causing a disruption. You will comply with the protocol we have established. Protocol, the father repeated softly, is not what you have been following. What you have been following is prejudice. The supervisor scoffed. Save the dramatics, please. Security will escort you out if you continue. One twin whimpered, pulling her sister closer. The father rested a calming hand on their shoulders, offering them reassurance even as the room pressed harder against him. But something shifted. A small but undeniable crack in the silence. A woman near the seating area rose to her feet. She had been recording quietly, hesitant. At first, but no longer able to ignore what was unfolding. I saw the ticket scan, she said. Her voice trembled, but her conviction did not. They scanned green. 3 times. A man at the charging station added, You threatened to call security on children. That is not protocol. That is wrong. The trainee stepped in again, choosing courage over fear this time. This is not how we are supposed to treat passengers, he said. especially not when the system already verified everything. The supervisor turned sharply. This does not concern passengers or lower-level staff. It concerns maintaining order. Order, the father said, is not maintained by humiliating people. The attendant rolled her eyes. Here we go? Everyone wants to make this about something it is not. It is exactly what it looks like, the woman recording replied. Someone else whispered, this is getting ugly. Another murmured, how is this happening in broad daylight? But then, the sound that truly changed the atmosphere arrived. A soft alert tone chimed from the supervisor's tablet. He looked down, expecting a standard notification, but his face drained of color. On the screen, a flashing red banner appeared, executive oversight enabled. Corporate authority connected. The attendant leaned over his shoulder. What is that? He swallowed hard. I do not know. But the father knew. And Rachel knew. And somewhere behind those unseen corporate feeds, people with far more authority than the supervisor or the attendant were now watching every second. The twins watched their father, sensing the shift. He was no longer just defending them. He was reclaiming something bigger. The attendant's voice wavered for the first time. This does not change anything. Security will still, but she stopped when she saw two airport officers approaching. Not aggressively, not at her command. They approached slowly, watching the supervisor, not the father. We received an alert from corporate review, one officer said. We need to understand what is happening here. The supervisor straightened abruptly. Officers, this passenger is attempting to board with fraudulent credentials. The officers turned to the father. Sir, may we see your tickets? He handed them over without hesitation. They scanned the first. Green. The second. Green. The third. Green. The officer looked up. These are completely valid. Then the scanner must be broken. The attendant snapped. Because there is no way, the officer shook his head. The scanner is working. These seats were purchased, registered, and verified. The supervisor's mouth went dry. That cannot be right. It was the father who answered, his voice calm but heavy with meaning. It is right. You just never expected it to be. Rachel's voice came through the earpiece again, perfectly timed. Sir, the board is standing by. Say the word if you want them to join the call directly. The father looked at his daughters. Their eyes reflected trust, fear, and something else, something like hope. He turned back to the officers. Before I say the word, he said quietly, I want them to understand exactly what they did. The attendant stiffened. The supervisor blinked. The terminal fell silent once more. They thought they understood who they were dealing with. They were seconds away from realizing how wrong they were. The attendant's confidence cracked first. Her stance loosened. Her voice pulled tight like a thread about to snap. The father did not raise his voice, but the steadiness in it carried a weight that filled the entire gate area. You scanned the tickets. You accused my children. You threatened to call security on us. Before anything else happens, I want you to explain why. The attendant blinked, struggling for composure. I followed protocol. No, he replied. You followed assumption. A ripple went through the crowd. Some looked away. Others leaned in as if bracing for the truth they already sensed. The supervisor stepped forward, trying to seize the moment before it slipped entirely from his grasp. Sir, this line of questioning is inappropriate. We will resolve this internally. The father shook his head. Internally is how problems like this stay hidden. My daughters deserve better than secrets and excuses. One airport officer exchanged a look with the other. They had arrived expecting a routine dispute. Instead, they were witnessing something that felt like a quiet courtroom, with truth on the verge of breaking open. The twins stood pressed against their father's side. One squeezed her eyes shut, remembering the attendant's voice rising above them. The other stared at her shoes, recalling the man in line who muttered, Some people try anything to get into first class. They were too young to understand the politics of discrimination, but old enough to feel when they were unwelcome. The father saw it on their faces. He had seen it before, on himself, at their age. A flash of memory surged up, uninvited but sharp. He was 8 years old, holding his mother's hand at a hotel lobby, watching a clerk pretend not to see them. When his mother approached the counter, the clerk said, The public restroom is down the hall, even though she had a reservation. The humiliation that sank into his childhood bones now surfaced in his daughter's trembling hands. The father inhaled once, slow, steady, clearing the memory but keeping its lesson. Then he faced the supervisor. When my children hand you valid tickets, and your first instinct is to assume fraud, that is not procedure. It is prejudice. The supervisor's jaw tightened. Sir, with all due respect, the father interrupted, is what you withheld from the moment we walked up to this gate. The woman who had been recording earlier raised her phone slightly. He is right, she said. They treated those girls like criminals before even scanning anything. A man near the monitors added, you saw how she talked to them. You do not speak to children like that. The attendant snapped. Everyone needs to stay out of this. You do not understand what it is like having to deal with people who... She stopped herself, but not quickly enough. The father's eyes narrowed. Finish the sentence. Her mouth opened, then closed, panic flickering behind her indignation. The supervisor attempted to shield her. This is getting out of hand. Officers, remove this family so we can restore order. One officer stepped forward, but the other placed a hand on his arm, holding him back. Hold on, he said. We cannot remove a passenger without cause. And so far, everything we have verified supports his claim. The attendant's voice cracked. You cannot take his side. You do not know who he is. Then came the shift. The father touched his earpiece again. Rachel, he said quietly, please confirm current corporate visibility. Her voice came instantly. Corporate oversight is fully engaged. Additionally, 3 board members have joined the monitoring channel. They have requested escalation clearance. The supervisor's face blanched. Board members, he whispered. The attendant stared at the father as if seeing him for the first time, but still not understanding. The father spoke again, every syllable measured. You will not touch my children. You will not speak to them as if they do not belong. And before this is over, you will understand exactly why your assumptions will cost you more than you expected. The attendant took a step back. The supervisor swallowed. The officers waited, realizing something bigger than protocol was unfolding in front of them. The father glanced down at his daughters, then back at the people who had tried to diminish them. This has gone far enough. It is time they learned the truth. The truth was coming, and it would hit with the force of authority they had never imagined lived behind the quiet man standing at gate C14. The moment the father said it was time for them to learn the truth, the energy at gate C14 shifted. It was subtle at first, like a quiet tremor beneath polished airport floors, but every person could feel something gathering, something inevitable. The attendant swallowed hard and stepped back as if distance could soften what was coming. The supervisor straightened his badge, trying to salvage his authority, even though the ground beneath him was already beginning to crack. The father touched his earpiece again. Rachel, he said, his voice calm but carrying a new weight. Proceed with full escalation. Her reply came without hesitation. Copy that. Executive authority verification has been pushed to the gate systems. Internal compliance is joining the live feed. Additionally, the board has requested to patch into the call if necessary. The attendant's eyebrows knitted together. Why is corporate involved? She demanded. This is a boarding issue, not a federal case. The father looked at her with the kind of patience that had been earned through years of surviving exactly these moments. It became more than a boarding issue when you decided my children were frauds before you even looked at their tickets. The officer holding the scanner shifted his stance. He glanced at the father, then at the twins, as if silently apologizing for the harm he had not yet stopped. The supervisor stepped forward again, struggling for control. Sir, whatever you are trying to do, it will not change the fact that you caused a disruption. Families like yours. He froze, realizing too late what he had said. A low gasp passed through the waiting area. Someone whispered, he did not just say that. The father's expression did not change, but the room felt the temperature drop. Families like mine, he repeated, letting the words hang for a long, heavy moment. The supervisor's face reddened, his mouth twitching as if searching for a justification that did not exist. I misspoke, he stammered. I simply meant, you meant exactly what you said, the father replied. Before the supervisor could respond, the screen on his tablet lit up again, brighter this time, with a notification that demanded attention. Corporate compliance alert. Executive protocol verified. The attendant leaned closer, her breath catching when she read the next line. Owner access request received. Owner access? She whispered. What does that mean? But the father was no longer looking at her. He was looking at his daughters, at the way they clung to his hands, at the fear that had no place in their hearts. He lowered himself to their height, his voice soft but unwavering. "Do you remember what I told you?" She nodded. "That we belong here." "Yes," he said, "and I am going to make sure everyone else remembers that too." When he stood, the calm that settled around him was no longer defensive. It was declarative. He turned to the officers. "I am ready for you to hear this as well. What happened here today is not a mistake. It is a pattern. It is the same pattern I faced at your age," he said to the twins, "and the same pattern that ends today." The attendant stepped back again, panic rising in her voice. "You are blowing this out of proportion." "No," someone from the crowd called out. "He is not. You talked down to his kids from the second they walked up. We all saw it." Another voice added, "And the supervisor made it worse." The father lifted one hand gently, and the crowd quieted. "This is not about embarrassing them," he said. "It is about accountability. And accountability begins with truth." He touched his earpiece one more time. "Rachel, initiate owner identification." "Yes, sir," she replied. The supervisor blinked. "Sir? Why is she calling you sir? Who are you?" The father stepped forward, not with arrogance, but with a dignity that had been denied too many times. "You will know in a moment," he said. The gate's main display monitor blinked, flickered, and then shifted to a corporate interface none of the staff had ever seen in person. A new message appeared across the screen, bold and impossible to ignore. "Executive owner identity confirmation in progress." The attendant's hand fell. From the intercom, her voice trembled. "This cannot be real." The truth was seconds away from landing, and when it did, it would dismantle everything they thought they understood about the man they tried to remove from Gate C-14. The gate monitors continued flashing their corporate override warning, casting a cold glow across the faces of everyone who had doubted, dismissed, or demeaned the family standing at the center of it all. The supervisor clutched his tablet, as if squeezing it might stop whatever revelation was seconds away from crashing down on him. The attendant looked back and forth between the father and the display, her breathing shallow, her certainty dissolving. "This is some kind of mistake," she muttered, but even she no longer believed her own words. The father remained steady, his daughters pressed into his sides for comfort, watching him with wide, trusting eyes. He had walked them through storms before, but nothing so public, nothing so bold, nothing that held a mirror up to the world with this much clarity. Rachel's voice returned through the earpiece, smooth as glass. "Sir, owner identification has been authenticated. Executive confirmation will display at the gate within the next few seconds. Do you want to make a verbal announcement before the system releases the data?" He exhaled once, slow and centered. "No," he replied softly. "Let the truth speak for itself." A hush fell over the terminal, heavy and anticipatory. Even the officers stepped back, sensing the shift from confrontation to revelation. The gate display flickered again, brightened, and then the corporate seal of the airline appeared, an emblem no employee at this level had ever seen activated in a public setting. Under it, in bold white text, appeared the words, "Executive Owner Verified." Name, Jonathan Marshall. Position, CO Owner and Chief Strategic Officer. The attendant's knees seemed to weaken. The supervisor's hands dropped to his sides. The trainee gasped audibly. The passengers, who had once whispered blame and annoyance, now stared in stunned silence at the man they had watched attempt to defend his daughters with nothing but calm dignity. One woman whispered, "Oh my God, he owns the airline." Another murmured, "They almost threw out the owner's family." The father, Jonathan Marshall, finally spoke, not with triumph, but with quiet gravity. "You thought you were dealing with someone who could not fight back. Someone you could dismiss without consequence. Someone who would walk away to avoid a scene." The attendant shook her head, stumbling for words. "Sir, Mr. Marshall, I did not know who you were." He looked at her steadily. "You did not need to know who I was. You only needed to treat us with the same respect you offered the passengers who came before us." Her mouth parted, but no sound came out. The supervisor attempted to step forward, but Jonathan raised a hand just slightly, and the man froze. "Before you speak," Jonathan said, "consider that I have heard every word you used. I have seen every assumption you made. And so has the board of directors." The officer holding the scanner stared at Jonathan with wide eyes. "Sir, we had no idea." Jonathan turned to him with a softness he had not offered the others. "I know you did not. And you tried to do the right thing. You spoke up. That matters. The trainee swallowed hard, emotion rising in his throat. Jonathan shifted his attention back to the attendant and the supervisor. You threatened to call security on my children. You implied that families like mine do not belong in first class. You decided the tickets were fraudulent before your scanner even beeped. The attendant's voice cracked. Please, Mr. Marshall, I am begging you. I could lose my job. I am not interested in destroying you, he said. But I am very interested in holding you accountable. A murmur of agreement swept through the passengers. One man said firmly, he should not have had to reveal who he is for you to treat him with basic respect. Another added, imagine treating two little girls like that. Jonathan placed a hand gently on each daughter's shoulder. This moment is not just about us, he said. It is about every traveler you assumed was less deserving. Every person you made feel small. Every child you taught to doubt their place in the world. The supervisor tried again to speak, voice shaking. Mr. Marshall, please, we can explain. Jonathan shook his head. You cannot explain prejudice. You can only change it. Then, with a single quiet command, he touched his earpiece once more. Rachel, he said, inform the board that I am ready to proceed. Everyone in gate C14 knew what that meant. The consequences were coming, and there would be no misunderstanding them this time. The gate area remained frozen in a stunned silence as Jonathan Marshall, co-owner of the airline they had tried to push him out of, lowered his hand from his earpiece. His daughters stood close, shielded by his presence, yet watching with a mixture of awe and relief as the truth finally settled over the room like a long-awaited verdict. The attendant's lips trembled, her voice barely audible. Mr. Marshall, please, there has to be something I can say. Jonathan did not respond right away. He let the weight of the moment rest on her shoulders, the same weight she had placed on two innocent children without hesitation. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady and measured. We will address that shortly. The supervisor, desperate now, stepped forward. Sir, I can assure you we will handle this internally. There is no need to escalate matters further. Jonathan looked at him with a level, unblinking gaze. You have already handled it internally. That is the problem. Silence and dismissal are the only outcomes that come from internal handling. Before the supervisor could reply, Rachel's voice filled Jonathan's ear again. Sir, the board has confirmed they are ready to proceed with formal action. They are requesting your directive. Jonathan nodded slightly. Stand by. The gate's public address system chimed unexpectedly, turning every head. A message appeared on the supervisor's tablet, so abruptly, he almost dropped it. Internal termination protocol pending. A second line followed. Waiting for executive owner approval. The supervisor's face paled. Mr. Marshall, we can correct this. We can undergo additional training, file a report, issue apologies, whatever it takes. Jonathan's calm deepened. Justice does not come from scrambling to fix a moment after you realize who someone is. It comes from doing the right thing before you know anything about them. The attendant's voice broke entirely. Please, I did not mean to harm them. I just thought they did not belong. Jonathan raised a hand gently, but firmly. You thought they did not belong because of how they looked. That is not a misunderstanding. That is not an accident. That is a choice. A chorus of agreement rose from the passengers. One man spoke loudly. If he had not been the owner, you would have dragged his kids to security. A woman added, some of us travel with our children. You treated those girls like they were criminals. The attendant covered her mouth. Tears. Building, but Jonathan did not waver. His daughters watched him with steady faith, absorbing this moment that would shape how they understood dignity for years to come. He lowered himself again until he was eye level with them. What happened today, he said softly, is something you will see in the world. But you do not have to fear it, because you will always know your worth, even when others refuse to see it. They nodded, small but resolute. When Jonathan rose, the officers waiting nearby straightened instinctively. One of them spoke. Mr. Marshall, we want you to know we will fully cooperate with whatever actions you take. What happened here was unacceptable. Jonathan offered a slight nod. Thank you. He tapped his earpiece. Rachel, proceed. Her reply was immediate. Confirming termination of staff involved. Corporate compliance is documenting all verbal exchanges, visual footage, and procedural violations. Stand by for system completion. The supervisor sputtered. Termination? Sir, Please, you threatened to have my family removed from an area they had every right to stand in, Jonathan said. You implied they did not belong because of who they were. And you did it without hesitation. The gate display blinked again. Staff access revoked. Termination in effect. The attendant let out a small cry, covering her face as her badge flashed red. The supervisor stared at his tablet in disbelief as his credentials vanished before his eyes. A murmur swept through the passengers. Relief, outrage, vindication, all layered together. Then applause began. Soft at first, hesitant, then stronger. Gate C-14 erupted not in celebration of punishment, but in recognition of justice delivered in real time. Jonathan remained composed, not triumphant. He looked at the former staff members with a quiet finality. You were given power. You chose to use it to diminish others. That is why this is the consequence. The attendant sobbed openly now. The supervisor looked hollow, defeated. The truth had arrived with the force of authority they never imagined would stand in their way, and there was no reversing it. Jonathan gently guided his daughters toward the boarding door. Come, he said. It is time to show you where you belong. And for the first time that day, the twins walked without fear. The applause at gate C-14 softened into a reverent hush as Jonathan Marshall guided his daughters toward the jet bridge. Each step they took seemed to restore something that the morning had tried to break. Each breath steadier than the last. Each gaze forward instead of down. The passengers who had witnessed everything cleared a respectful path, their expressions a mixture of apology, admiration, and heavy reflection. Behind Jonathan, the two terminated employees stood in stunned silence. The attendant's tears streaked down her face as she clutched her deactivated badge. The supervisor stared blankly at his tablet, the harsh red of the revoked access notification glowing like a verdict he could not escape. But Jonathan did not look back at them, not out of cruelty, but out of intention. This moment was no longer about their downfall. It was about his daughter's rising sense of belonging, dignity, and truth. As they moved forward, one of the airport officers approached carefully. Mr. Marshall, he said quietly, I want to personally apologize for everything that happened. What you experienced was unacceptable. We appreciate the grace you showed. Jonathan nodded, gracious but unwavering. Thank you. What matters most now is that my daughters learned the right lesson from this. One twin looked up at him. Daddy, she whispered, were they mean because of us? He knelt beside her, brushing a gentle hand across her cheek. No, he said softly. They were mean because of their own hearts, not because of who you are. You belong anywhere you walk with confidence and truth. His other daughter slipped her hand into his. So we can still sit in first class? He smiled. You can sit in any class you choose for the rest of your lives. As they stepped onto the jet bridge, passengers behind them continued talking in hushed tones. A mother holding a toddler whispered, I hope my child grows up understanding what fairness really means. A businessman shook his head. Unbelievable, they talked to him like he was nothing, and he owns the whole operation. A college student muttered, this is why people record everything. Some truths need witnesses. The trainee, the only staff member who had spoken up, approached Jonathan quietly before he boarded. Sir, he said, his voice trembling with both nerves and sincerity. I am sorry I did not speak louder. I should have done more. Jonathan looked at him with kindness. You spoke when it mattered, he said. Courage is not always loud. Sometimes it is the voice that rises when silence feels safer. The young man swallowed hard, a mix of relief and gratitude washing over him. Thank you, sir. I will remember that. Jonathan offered him a firm nod before guiding his daughters the rest of the way down the jet bridge. The warm cabin air met them as they stepped inside, and the lead flight attendant, one who had not been involved in the incident, greeted them with a respectful, almost reverent tone. Mr. Marshall, we are honored to have you on board. Your seats are ready. For the first time that day, the twins smiled freely, their small hands brushing the wide leather seats that had once been questioned, doubted, and nearly taken from them. Jonathan lifted them gently into their places. See, he said, this is where you sit because you earned it, and because you belong. The plane continued boarding, but at the gate behind him, the consequences Jonathan had set into motion were still unfolding. Corporate compliance officers had arrived to escort the former employees away from the terminal. Their careers with the airline were over. More importantly, a mandatory bias review was initiated for that entire airport branch, along with a formal investigation into past passenger complaints. Change was coming, not whispered or delayed, but immediate and undeniable. As Jonathan fastened his seatbelt, Rachel's voice returned in his earpiece, gentler this time. Sir, the board wanted me to relay their statement. They stand with you completely. They will initiate a company-wide review of all customer-facing procedures. Today will not be forgotten. Jonathan closed his eyes for a moment, letting the significance of that settle. Not because he wanted recognition, but because he wanted a world where his daughters would never again have to prove they deserved basic respect. When he opened his eyes, both girls were looking at him with pure admiration. Daddy, one said, you did not even yell. No, he replied, smiling softly. Real power does not need to shout. It just needs to stand tall. The engines hummed as the aircraft prepared for departure. Outside the window, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm glow across the runway. Jonathan took his daughter's hands and gave them a gentle squeeze. Remember this moment, he said. Not because of what happened to us, but because of how we rose above it. And as the plane lifted into the sky, Gate C-14 behind them transformed from a place of humiliation into a lesson, a moment when silence ended, dignity prevailed, and justice stood tall without ever needing to raise its voice.